Today, the 1st of February 1997, Don Everly is 60 years old. And to celebrate the occasion, Don looks back over the career of the Everly Brothers. Don Everly at 60 is presented by Mike Reed.
Bye-bye love, bye-bye happiness, hello loneliness, I think I'm gonna cry. Wake up, little Susie, wake up. Wake up, little Susie, wake up. I got a brand new baby and I feel so good. She loves me even better than I thought she would. I'm on my way to her house and I'm pull out a bread. But when I see her tonight, I'm gonna squeeze her to death. We're all dead. Pretty little peg claudette. Dream, 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 dream. Dream, dream, dream when I want you.
The Everly Brothers are one of the greatest pop acts of all time. And this year marks two major anniversaries for them. It's 40 years since Bye Bye Love, their first single, was recorded, and today is Don Everly's 60th birthday. Don Everly was born on this day in 1937, and his brother Phil came along 2 years later. Their father Ike was an accomplished guitar player, and he taught the boys a few chords as soon as they could hold a guitar. Well, by the time Don was 8 and Phil was 6, they were playing and harmonizing together and singing with the rest of the family.
Brothers, it was traditional. The Wilburn brothers, Leuven brothers. My mom and my dad and his two brothers, they were a trio. So, I mean, they were a second generation Everly brothers when you really get down to it. Family sang together, and it's traditional in the South. On the back porch, the family gets together, and on the front porch, and sings together.
The Everly Brothers' parents, Ike and Margaret, were well known in the southern states as country and gospel singers. And during the day, Ike worked in the coal mines of Kentucky, and at night played concerts. Don and Phil would sit in on rehearsals and learn the country music songs of the day. Here's Margaret Everly.
My husband worked with a boy from North Carolina, and they called themselves the North Carolina Boys. They would come home to rehearse songs, and Phil would get in and help sing. And he had a high voice, so they would see how high he could go. They would hit a note, and Phil would repeat the note. All these entertainers, they didn't mind taking a little time to say, hey, you sound good, boy. Let's hear you sing Cool Water or something, and Phil would do that. And they would come home and rehearse the old songs like Barbara Allen, and the boys would hear that.
'Twas in the merry month of May, when flowers were a-blooming, sweet Willie on his deathbed lay, for the love of Barbara Allen. He sent his servant to the town where she did dwell in, saying, Master dear has sent me here, if your name be Barbara Allen.
Barbara Allen, recorded by the Everly Brothers on the album Songs Our Daddy Taught Us in 1958. As well as doing concert tours with their parents, the Everly Brothers also joined them performing on the radio as the Everly Family. Don remembers these programs.
Well, it's a family show where, good morning, everybody. We'd sing the theme song, all of us, and then good morning, it's the Everly family. This is Dad, and this is, Mom and Don and baby boy Phil. And Dad would MC it, and then we'd sing a song, and Phil and I would sing a duet, then Phil would sing a song, then Mom would do a recitation, and then we'd all sing a trio in back of it, and then we'd play an instrumental, then we'd sing a gospel song. It was the family, the Everly family, up in the morning, early in the morning, 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6, for the farmers in Iowa when they were up getting their cows together and doing all that and cooking breakfast and getting ready to go to the fields.
Well, a great big howdy-do to all of our good friends and neighbors. This is Dad Everly talking for the Everly family. And we're going to play and sing you some songs, neighbors, family style, also country style. And we got the whole gang on deck, Mom, Don, baby boy Phil. And Mom, we kind of ought to tell the folks just how old these youngsters are. Some of the folks probably don't know. And Don, our oldest boy, is 15 years old. Phil's 13. Of course, me and Mom, we quit telling our age a long time ago. You know, I kind of suggest that we get the Everly Brothers to team up on one here. Phil, what are you going to sing this time?
Well, Dad, we'd like to do a number for the folks, and what's called Don't Let a Love Die.
Someone stole you, my darling, from me. Someone stole my love and your heart. Is it really true you don't care for me? Have you missed me since we've been apart?
The Everly Family Radio Show broadcast in 1952 with Don aged 15 and baby boy Phil just 13. Well, by the time Don and Phil were at high school, they were pretty accomplished performers. Don was a big fan of Hank Williams and had decided that he wanted to become a country music songwriter.
I was a big fan of Hank Williams, and he was right songwriter. All of a sudden, that just dawned on me that that's what and I was very fortunate. I got one published when I was about 17. Chet Atkins came to Knoxville, Tennessee, where we were working. Dad had been corresponding with him, and he invited us to Nashville, Phil and I went over and showed him some of the songs. And he gave me some pointers. He really did, because I just heard the original song that was recorded, Thou Shalt Not Steal, by Kitty Wells back in 54, I think. And I just heard it again for the first time in 25 or 30 years, I forget. I can't believe I really wrote it down. I'm going to have to call Chet up and ask him how much did he help me. Kitty Wells, it was a follow-up to her, and we made enough money, I'll tell you. Made enough money off that to get us to Nashville. Buy new tires for the car, and get us into the Union, and some outfits, and just set us up here for a little bit.
I stole to satisfy a longing in my heart. I didn't stop to realize.
Thou Shalt Not Steal, a song which was a big hit for Kitty Wells in 1955 and was written by Don Everly. And it was Chet Atkins who was helping the boys get started in the music business. Chet was running a small publishing company at the time and had met the boys at a gig a year earlier.
Yeah, I brought them to town first when they were 15 and 17. And I rented them up in Knoxville. Their father played guitar, fingerstyle guitar. And so I'd heard of him a long time. And so I played up there at a fair, and they came out to see me at the fair. And I guess they didn't have money to get in. They were outside the fence, this wire screen fence, talking to me. And I didn't think at the time, I was a little stupid that I should have gotten them on in to the fair. But anyway, I said, my boys here are good singers. He said, I want to bring them over to Nashville and let you hear some of their stuff, some of their songs. And at the time, I had a little publishing company. I was not working for a record company except freelancing. And so I brought them over, and they had a song, after I said, I've forgotten you, and aren't you loves Here we go, here we are again. And I got Wanda Jackson to record it.
In 1955, with the help of Chet Atkins and the money Don had earned from Thou Shalt Not Steal, the Everlys moved to Nashville. But as Phil Everly remembers, it wasn't all plain sailing.
We got on records immediately when we went to Nashville when I was 16 and came out and bombed. And that's a hilarious story, that one. We cut 4 sides in 22 minutes with Carl Smith's band. We had just driven in from California, which is like a 2,000-mile trip, nonstop. And we're doing the sessions early in the morning, doing the session before they went home. So you know they were in a hurry, and we cut 4 sides. And I sang sharp through the last 3. You know? They were really bad.
The Everly Brothers had a couple of songs released on Columbia Records, but they failed to make any impact at all. Eventually, after trying a number of different companies, they went to see Wesley Rose, who was the head of the Nashville-based publishing company, Acuff Rose.
A couple of country boys, which were harmony singers, came in my office, and I liked what I heard. I called up Archie Blyer because I was scheduled to record some country records for Cadence, which was just then going into the country business, and asked him if I could record these boys, so he agreed. It was country harmony, but remember, country harmony wasn't heard, so it was unique and unusual for all markets.
Wesley Rose saw the potential in the Everly Brothers, and after fixing them with a record deal with Cadence Records, set about finding them the right song to record. He introduced Don and Phil to 2 Acuff Rose songwriters, Phyllis and Boudleaux Bryant.
I was a pop writer. My technique came from Italian ballads. And Boudleaux was a concert violinist, but his background was country, gospel, fa sol la singing, that's singing with shape notes. Boudleaux had the most fantastic feeling for chord structure that you ever saw. Your ear would go into orgasms over these chord structures. It was gorgeous.
And it was Phyllis and Boudleaux Bryant who came up with the first hit song for the Everlys.
Boudleaux and I are building this lake house, and we're on the way to the lake, and Boudleaux's all excited. He's got an idea for Johnny and Jack. And I said, well, what is it? So he starts with, bye-bye love, bye-bye happiness. Have you ever heard Johnny and Jack? Have you ever heard a thing called, oh, your poison love has stained the lifeblood in? That's Johnny and Jack. That's the same, bye-bye love, that's the same, you know? So now Archie Blyer is coming to town. I don't know how Wesley made this connection, but he's coming down to add a country section to Cadence. So Wesley was given the Everlys, or the Everlys were introduced to Wesley by Chet, because Chet couldn't do anything for them on RCA. And the click, the magic, happened there. Boudleaux called Johnny and Jack and asked them if they would release the song, because Archie loved it. The Everlys were ready to do anything that anybody said to get on record. So the kids did it, and that night at the Opry, all I heard was, man, did you hear that session? Did you hear that session? And they were talking about these kids, good-looking guys, and this damn song, Bye Bye Love. Hell, I can still sing that thing. It's been haunting me ever since I left that session. So I said to Phil, I said, something's happening here. I said, I've never heard so much buzz about a song, a new recording. I said, ever. And he said, gee, you really think so? I hope you're right. Well, Archie was hearing it. Boudleaux was hearing it. And it happened. It hit all 3 markets within 2 weeks.
Bye-bye love, bye-bye happiness, hello loneliness, I think I'm gonna cry. Bye-bye love, bye-bye sweet caress, hello emptiness, I feel like I could die. Bye-bye my love, goodbye. There goes my baby with someone new. She sure looks happy, I sure am blue. She was my baby till he stepped in. Goodbye to romance, that might have been. Bye-bye love, bye-bye happiness, hello loneliness, I think I'm gonna cry. Bye-bye love, bye-bye sweet caress, hello emptiness, I feel like I could die. Bye-bye my love, goodbye. I'm through with romance, I'm through with love, I'm through with counting
Bye Bye Love, written by Felice and Boudleaux Bryant, launched the Everly Brothers on the road to becoming one of the biggest pop acts in the world. And this song also helped Don achieve his lifelong ambition.
I wanted to get on the Grand Ole Opry. And I realized that we weren't typically Grand Ole Opry material when I arrived here. I mean, I wasn't Hank Williams, and we weren't the Louvin Brothers. They were typically the country sound. But Bye Bye Love changed everything. You know, just changed everything. From standing outside in the alley, we were on the stage. My life had hit the pinnacle when I was 19 or 20. Where's the girl? I've done it, you know. I have hit it. I couldn't believe it. First of all, we were also very, very popular. We would play the Paramount Theater in New York, you know, 4 or 5 shows a day, screaming teenagers throwing lipstick tubes and things at us and craziness and, you know, all that. But it comes to the Opry. You'd go and you'd sing, and that whole family audience would roar at the end of the song, and we'd sing another chorus. Then they'd roar again, and we'd sing another couple choruses, and it'd walk off, and the feeling was just incredible because it was your people.
And it was Don Everly's country music background, coupled with his love of rock and roll, that helped to shape the Everly Brothers' sound. The country harmonies added to the rhythmic rock and roll acoustic guitar became the Everly's trademark. Don Everly developed this guitar style after talking to Chet Atkins.
I told him, I said, I'm really crazy about Bo Diddley's rhythms and things. This was back when I was a teenager, basically. And he said, I said, what do you think he does? And he said, well, he's tuning it differently. So he showed me some tunings, G tuning. He showed me some things in the G tuning, which I took and used that as a basic for all the arrangement things in the early Everly Brothers stuff. And all the intros to Bye Bye Love and the fills and all that on Wake Up Little Susie's, all inspired by that. People would meet me and they'd say, what are you doing there? I'd still the tuning. They said, one of the little rewards I had in life not too long ago, a couple years ago, I was doing a fair date up in Canada. And this little 9-year-old boy was standing there and his cowboy hat on and things, and walking by, and Mr. Everly, you know, said, I have a question. He said, how do you do that thing in Wake Up Little Susie? I said, well, you got to tune it to G, put a capo on it, and get it up the neck there. And he said, you know, I explained it to him, and he seemed so relieved.
Wake Up Little Susie, the second hit for the Everly Brothers, and written again by the songwriting team of Felice and Boudleaux Bryant. And it was the Everly's next release, which was to be their first #1, and a song that's still regarded by many of their fans as their greatest song ever. Again, it was written by Boudleaux Bryant.
Boudleaux made a demo, and Boudleaux said, what do you think of that? And I said, my God, I said, your demo's a hit. I said, you could release that one and it's a hit. And the song was a hit with the Everlys, but not taken away from anybody. The song was a hit. A song can be a hit and still be in the books, but it's a hit. Just hasn't gotten out there yet. You know, a fast horse is a fast horse, even if he's in the barn.
Dream, 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 dream. Dream, dream, dream when I want you. In my arms when I want you. And all your charms whenever I want you. All I have to do is dream. Dream, dream, dream when I feel blue. In the night and I need you to hold me tight whenever I want you. All I have to do is dream. I can make you mine, taste your lips of wine anytime, night or day. Only trouble is, gee whiz, I'm dreaming my life away. I need you so that I could die. I love you so, and that is why whenever I want you, all I have to do is dream. Dream, 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 dream. I can make you mine, taste your lips of wine, anytime, night or day. Only trouble is, gee whiz, I'm dreaming my life away. I need you so that I could die. I love you so, and that is why whenever I want you, all I have to do is dream. Dream, 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 dream. Dream, dream, dream.
By the summer of 1958, with Elvis Presley away in the army, the Everly Brothers were the biggest rock and roll act in the world. They toured extensively, and Don remembers one particular tour in Texas where the Everlys were supported by Buddy Holly and the Crickets, and what was probably the world's first ever supergroup came together.
We had a band that did not work at all, hired hands, as they say, and they didn't even like the music. Buddy listened to it, and I listened to it, and I went, oh. And Buddy says, we'll back you. I said, "But will you?" We said, sure. He's so a gracious man. And so it was Phil and I and the Crickets, Buddy, out there. And one hell of a show, let me tell you. We kicked it.
Things had happened remarkably quickly for the Everlys. By this time, Don was just 21 and Phil only 19. Virtually straight from high school to being the biggest act in the world. Wesley Rhodes remembers what it was like for these two young country boys out in the big wide world.
After we'd had 4 or 5 million sellers, and we used to play the Ed Sullivan TV show. And on the second Ed Sullivan TV show, we were staying in New York, and I went over to the rehearsal, and the boys were late. They were about a half hour late, so after the rehearsal, I went back to the hotel with them, and I said, that'll be the last time you're late. From now on, I want you on time because our reputation is worth something, and it's unfair to the producer to be late. And either Don or Phil, I don't recall which, said, well, it's a problem calling downstairs. And I asked them what they called downstairs for. They said to find out what time it was. And I looked at their wrist, and neither one of them had a wristwatch. So we went out right downstairs in the first jewelry store and bought them each a wristwatch. And this is what I mean. Their moral character was so good they didn't complain about anything until it really hit you on the blind side. You see, they're both small-town boys, and it was a little hard for them to believe how big their success was.
Well, we were naive because our parents were naive. We were just country musicians. We didn't steal, cheat. My father was a coal miner. He got a job on radio. And so basically, when it came down to business, he didn't know anything about business. He didn't teach me anything about business. And when you went up against an accountant like Wesley, or you went up against a lot of these people, you know, that were running the record businesses and publishing businesses, you know, naive. I guess would be the answer to that one.
During 1959, the Everlys recorded 4 more hits written by Felice and Boodle O'Brien. Bird Dog, Problems, Take a Message to Mary, and Poor Jenny. And then came the first song written by Don Everly. In the studio, he called on Jerry Allison of the Crickets to play the same sort of tom-tom drum sound that he'd played for Buddy Holly on Peggy Sue.
I changed the arrangement sounds. I used the drums as the focal point. And that song was also a love song, a true song, kind of. That song was about really going to Australia and kissing a girl. And on the way back, writing the song. That's what that was about.
Never felt like this until I kissed you. How did I exist until I kissed you? Never had you on my mind. Now you're there all the time. Never knew what I missed till I kissed you. I kissed you. Oh yeah, things have really changed since I kissed you. My life's not the same now that I kissed you. Oh yeah, you got a way about you. Now I can't live without you. Never knew what I missed till I kissed you. I kissed you. Oh yeah, you don't realize what you do to me. And I didn't realize what a kiss could be. You got a way about you. Now I can't live without you. Never knew what I missed till I kissed you. I kissed you. Oh yeah, you don't realize what you do to me. And I didn't realize what a kiss could be. You got a way about you. Now I can't live without you. Never knew what I missed till I kissed you. I kissed you. Oh yeah, I kissed you. I kissed you.
Till I Kissed You, written by Don Everly. As time went on, a tension was growing between the Everly Brothers and their manager, publisher Wesley Rose. Wesley dictated the songs they recorded, how they recorded them, and he wouldn't entertain any songs that he didn't own the publishing on. Now that, of course, began to cause problems.
He was a jolly man when I first met him. He changed over the years, but he was a very jolly and happy man, and I hung out with him. Spent a lot of time with him, going to dinner and living a really kind of an Italian lifestyle, and it was wonderful, and I enjoyed it. He was a very strong man, very opinionated. When it came to music, he couldn't fathom why I would want to do Let It Be Me. It seemed the only thing he really liked was what he published. In fact, that was the case. If we liked something, he'd try to get the hope the writer try to get the publishing on it. If he couldn't, he didn't like it. So, that's basically what that was about. It's disturbing that could go on, but that was the way it was. He was a publisher, and the artist was on their own. We didn't have a manager. Unfortunately, he was acting as a manager, and he wasn't acting in our best interest.
In an attempt to break the hold that Wesley Rose had over the recording sessions, the Everlys recorded Let It Be Me away from Nashville in New York. And not only was the song not published by Acuff Rose, it was also their first recording using strings.
I bless the day I found you. I want to stay around you, and so I beg you, let it be me. Don't take this head
Let It Be Me was the final song the Everlys recorded for Cadence Records. And in early 1960, they signed to the newly formed Warner Brothers Records for $1 million.
The two boys had decided they no longer wanted to be on Cadence about a year before the contract was over. So it wasn't a thing of all of a sudden deciding to leave. So I started working to negotiate a contract. And at that particular time, Warner Brothers was just starting over here. They had been out maybe a year or two. And I had talked to Jim Conklin, president of Warner Brothers. Well, the negotiations were working fine right up until the last day before the announcement. And at that time, Jim Conklin and I had a misunderstanding, so I told him the deal was off. Well, there was a fellow called Herman Starr, who was head of Warner Brothers Publishing, who was head of all the Warner Brothers at the time. And he called me up and said, Wes, look, we need the Everly Brothers bad, otherwise we may just close the label. The label was very unsuccessful. And he says, I'll give you even more than you're asking. I said, I don't want any more than I'm asking. I want exactly what we talked about. So we closed the deal out, and it was the first $1 million deal in the history of the record industry.
And the first song the Everlys recorded for Warner Brothers was another song written by Don Everly, Kathy's Clown, which was to become the Everlys' all-time biggest-selling record.
Don't want your love anymore. Don't want your kisses, that's for sure. I die each time I hear this sound. Here
As Kathy's Clown reached number one in Britain and America, the Everlys started their first tour of Britain backed by the Crickets. Back in America, Wesley Rose was trying to shape their career in the same way that Elvis had been directed by Colonel Tom Parker, into the movies. Phil Everly remembers the screen test.
They somehow managed to get a screen test. Wesley did through an agency. It cost him a lot of money. At that time, it was like $25,000. And they strapped the guns on Don and I. And Donald was dressed as Black Bart, and I was the kind Charlie, you know, in brown. I looked like the clean cut, and he looked like Lash. Anyway, they had you know, he's together. When clubs around, I don't know, 5 or 10 times, you know, about 11th take, and Donald's last line is, "Well, I'll be seeing you." And I said, "Not in the movies."
But while the brothers were in Hollywood doing their screen test, Another hit song came their way from the Crickets guitar player, Sonny Curtis.
I was in basic training in Fort Ord, California, and I wrote one verse, and I went down to Hollywood on a 3-day pass. The Everlys were down there studying acting at Warner Brothers. They had just been signed to Warner Brothers Records, and I played it to Don first, and he loved the song. He called Phil down, and they worked out that really nice harmony part that goes with the song. And they informed me that I'd have to write another verse. And so I went back off up to Fort Ord to be in the Army, and I got a 10-day leave to move down to Fort Gordon, Georgia, and I wrote another verse, and I put it in the mail to them. And a couple of days after I had mailed this verse to them, I got a letter from Jerry Allison. He said, the Everly Brothers just cut your song. And they sang the same verse twice.
Facing 2 years in the Army.
We were going to get drafted, but the age difference would have put us out of commission if we had been drafted 5 years. We wouldn't have been able to do anything. So the alternative was to get in the reserves and get our military obligation over with, so we joined together in the buddy system in the Marine Corps. That was quite a tumultuous period of 62, 63. The world was changing. You know, Elvis was sort of off, and the English thing was beginning to bubble under, and then by 64, that all changed. And you had the baby boomers. Groundswell of teenagers all of a sudden. And as usual, they want their own, music. Something 4 years earlier doesn't matter. They want what they hear in high school.
And although the Everlys did record a few classic songs after this time, like Crying in the Rain and The Price of Love, generally the records failed to make much impact. They were seen as being a bit old-fashioned. The Beatles and the Stones had arrived, and they were off in the Army. And coupled with poor management, they slipped from being rock stars onto the cabaret circuit.
Had a manager that booked me in any toilet between here and Hong Kong. Worked everywhere. Spent about 10 years on the road, of really heavy road work. Wound up being a nightclub act out of it. Learned, played Vegas and all that. I've been everywhere so many times, I had to get them all mixed up. And life's too short to just spend it in an airplane in a motel somewhere. I wouldn't do it again. It was a hard thing to stop, too, because I went out on this tour in 1963, and I didn't get off the road till 73. And it took a lot to stop it.
The Brothers!
A little bit of our background. Phil and I grew up in music business. That's really all we've known all our lives. Our mother and father were in show business. Country music. We sang country music and gospel music on radio. We had a little radio show called the Everly Family Show in Iowa, Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And, we moved around a lot. Really couldn't hold the jobs down, to be perfectly honest. We used to sing things by mail order, If you listened to our radio show, you could write in a letter and get your rose bushes, from the Everly family. Or you could write in and get your rat poison. And Mom used to make homemade brownies. We would send those out, too. All kinds of things like that. Yeah. While Phil and I were in high school, we had a hit record. We made a record, and it was a big hit. So naturally, Mom and Dad became excess baggage. So we fired them and went out on our own into the club business. And now here we are at the Grand Hotel. But we think about Mom and Dad every now and again. And just to prove it to you, we'd like to sing a country song.
First thing I remember knowing was a lonesome whistle blowing and a youngin's dream of growing up to ride on a freight train leaving town, not knowing where I'm bound, and no one can change my mind but Mama tried. One and only rebel child.
The Everly Brothers in Cabaret at the Grand Hotel, Anaheim, California in February 1970. The grueling round of 10 years on the road, 3 shows a night in this sort of venue eventually took its toll. Increasingly, the brothers were falling out. They'd played together since they were at school, but now it was becoming impossible for them to continue to work together. Here's Don Everly.
Well, it's impossible, I think. I don't know anybody's never done it for 40, 50 years. The people used to run me nuts with, well, why don't you want to sing with your brother? I say, you got any brothers or sisters? Oh, yeah, but I don't speak to them. I said, well, let's just consider trying to work with them for 25, 30 years. Phil and I know each other really well. Probably closer than most people because they don't, brothers, they get about 18, they go their separate ways. But we were hitched together to the wagon.
Joe Smith was a Warner Brother executive at the time.
You would hear the same complaint, you'd hear the same cry from producers, from writers, boy, if I could do a record with the Everly Brothers, I could get them back. Well, in fact, they couldn't. We tried a number of producers, we tried a number of writers, and the boys, with each blow, regressed even more, and they were having enormous internal difficulties between the two of them. There was one incident, there was a record session, I was in the control room, and they were singing in a vocal booth, and all of a sudden there was like a bang, and you couldn't hear any more singing. Well, Philip had knocked Donald down. Something had happened in the harmony, and he turned and he just plowed him under, and the session ended, of course, right after that. And they were constantly bickering. You could understand it. These boys had made it very young, had been rather unsophisticated, unworldly, attained enormous success, and now, while still at a relatively young age, in their middle, late 20s, people weren't wanting what they did.
It went terrifically for quite a while, We'd go in the studio and everything was just perfect. Boy, they made such great records and were writing such good songs. And then the publisher, Wesley Rose, I think he got a little envious of what the others were contributing. He wanted to be A&R man, producer, and everything, and there was quite a bit of pill taking and drugs involved, pep pills, and so all of a sudden it was destroyed. We get in the studio and we were all so tight we couldn't play because these people were all fighting amongst each other, against each other, and so it's sad.
Joe Smith and Chet Atkins. Whatever the problems, things finally came to a head in 1973. During a gig, Phil smashed his guitar on stage and walked off, leaving Don to finish the show on his own. This was to be their last appearance together for over 10 years.
Well, we were playing a week at Knoxbury Farm, and Donald had called me and said that he wanted to stop, and we ought to take some time off from each other, and I agreed with him. And that was going to be the last concert. And we had 3 shows to do that night, because that's what you do at Knoxbury. And on the first show, I think Donald just overdid the circumstances too much, and when I put my guitar down, and I did break my guitar on stage, but I put it down like if you'd put down a weapon. I was through. That was enough for me. The circumstances were too embarrassing, and I didn't want to do it anymore. I wasn't going to watch Everly Brothers go out in a sort of a half-ass way like that, and so I quit. I mean, it sounds like I quit, but I mean, it's something that Donald wanted to do, and it's fine.
We used to have good times together, but now I feel them slip away. It makes me cry to see love die. So sad to watch good love go bad. Remember how you used to feel it. You said nothing could change your mind. It breaks my heart to see us part. So sad to watch good love go bad. Is it any wonder that I feel so blue when I know for certain that I'm losing you? Remember how you used to feel it. You said nothing could change your mind. It breaks my heart to see us part. So sad to watch good love go bad. So sad to watch good love go bad.
Such was the bitterness between the Everly Brothers that they had hardly spoken to each other for 10 years and in fact only met on the occasion of their father's funeral. Phil lived in Los Angeles, Don moved back to Nashville. Albert Lee, the guitar player with the Everly Brothers band, had met Phil during one of the early tours of Britain. He remembers how bad the feeling was between the brothers during the mid-1970s.
I found myself with the Crickets at that time, and I was playing with the Crickets. And I can remember being over at Jerry Allison's house, and Don Everly called up. He said to Jerry Allison, "Come on over to this bar. We're playing this local bar, and it's great fun. We do it every Tuesday night, and Buddy Emmons plays." And I remember J.I. said to him, "Hey, you know, I've got somebody here from England. You know, Albert Lee." You know, he said, "Oh, Albert." He said, "Oh, that's Phil's friend, isn't it?" You know, so it was a little bit touchy, you know. Anyway, I went out to the club, took my guitar and sat in, and from that moment on, Don and I were like the best of friends, you know. And I was such a huge fan of Don, you know, and we did this gig every week, and you know, I was hanging out with him quite a lot at that time.
The Everly Brothers continued to record as solo artists, and although both of them produced some good albums, they failed to sell in great quantities. And apart from a couple of hits by Phil Everly, one of them as a duet with Cliff Richard, there were no hit singles. Don Everly continued to tour, and he kept up his friendship with Albert Lee.
By that time, I was playing with Emmylou Harris, you know, and I can remember going to Europe with Emmylou, and Don was on the show too, and on a number of those shows, I ended up singing harmony with Don, you know, which is kind of a surprise. I can remember rehearsing at Wembley about an hour before we were due to go on. You know, we ran through a few tunes, and he said, "Do you want to sing on a couple of these?" I said, "What?" He said, "No, you know, Dream or Bye Bye Love." I said, "You're kidding, aren't you?" He said, "No, if you know, I'd really appreciate it if you'd sing on them, you know." So I did, you know, and it was like straight in at the deep end. I was an Everly brother, you know.
As their solo projects failed, it was inevitable that the Everlys would make a comeback. People still wanted to see them together, particularly in Britain. And so they patched up their differences, and a reunion concert was planned at the Albert Hall for September the 23rd, 1983. Albert Lee again.
I always hoped that if they ever got back together that they'd ask me to do it and I'd be available, you know, and like a few years later, and I was actually playing with Eric Clapton at the time, I got a call from Terry Slater from London saying, oh, it looks like we're going to put something together, you know, can you do it? I said, God, I'll be there, you know. And we were actually talking about maybe doing a quiet little gig somewhere as a warm-up, you know, but then they said, no, that will be cheating, you know, this has got to be, you know, the first gig. And so we forego the luxury of having a little warm-up gig somewhere at a little club and did it cold at the Albert Hall. And we'd been rehearsing, you know, but it was very exciting for me, I must say.
I was there for that reunion on September the 23rd, 1983, and they came on from separate sides of the Albert Hall, and they were on stage together for the first time in 10 years.
How you doing?
Wine is sweet, gin is bitter. Drink all you can, but you won't forget her. You talk too much, you laugh too loud. You see her face in every crowd. That's the price of love, price of love. Let you pay, you dues and pay. Price of love, cost you more when the other plays.
Since that concert in 1983, the Everly Brothers have continued to tour every year in America and every other year in Britain. Their influence can be heard echoing throughout popular music. Their harmonies can be heard in the recordings of the Beatles. You can hear their sound in the Hollies, Simon & Garfunkel, and the Eagles. Their contribution to pop music is enormous. And this year, 40 years since Bye Bye Love was released, they're being presented with a Lifetime Achievement Grammy Award. And they're still going strong. Here's Don Everly.
I'm really happier now, basically, musically, because I work with Buddy Emmons and I'm talking to Brent Mayer over here at Magnetone, and I'm going to do some sort of project. I'm hoping to drag Phil into some kind of project. One, I'd like to do a really good country record with Phil and I. Basically, that's what we are. I mean, especially with country music, the state it is now. I mean, I know it could be called new country. I know what they'd call us, but old new back here on the home and arranged country or something. I don't know what they'd call us, but we certainly could do it.
And in 1997, the Everly Brothers will be on tour again in Britain, and we'll be recording them live for a concert that you'll be able to hear on Radio 2 later this year. I'm Mike Reed, and this has been a Smooth Operations production. And on this day, the 1st of February 1997, Don Everly's 60th birthday, I'll leave you with the sound of the Everly Brothers.
I'll never let you see the way my broken heart is hurting me. I've got my pride.